Emily Thompson had always believed that life could be simple if you just went along with the flow. She worked as a waitress in a small cafe, serving coffee to tired businessmen, mothers with their children, and the occasional regular who always seemed to sit at the corner booth. Life was predictable, mundane, but it was safe. That is until the day Vincent Romano walked through the door. The air seemed to shift when he entered, his presence undeniably commanding. Tall, broad-shouldered, with an aura of power that none could ignore, Vincent was not the kind of man one expected to find in a place like this. His dark eyes scanned the room with a look that suggested he had seen things most people couldn't even imagine. The moment their eyes met, Emily felt a rush of unfamiliar tension, as though the world had suddenly tilted off balance. Vincent, known in the city as the Viper, a ruthless mafia boss feared by many, had never paid attention to someone like Emily before. But something about her calmness, her innocence, intrigued him. She was just a simple waitress, but there was a strength in her that he couldn't quite place. He came back the next day, and the next, and slowly, something began to change. Vincent found himself looking forward to their conversations, the way she smiled without judgment, the way she didn't flinch when he spoke to her. Emily, in turn, started to notice how he seemed different from the men she usually encountered. Vincent wasn't like the others. His quiet confidence made him stand out, and she couldn't help but wonder what lay beneath his hardened exterior. But she had no idea who he truly was. He never spoke of his past or his connections. All Emily knew was that she felt safe when he was around. Little did she know, this simple connection would turn her life upside down. The moment she accepted his invitation to dinner, everything changed. She had just unknowingly stepped into a world she had only heard of in stories, a world of power, danger, and people who would do anything to stay in control. But for Vincent, Emily was the one thing that made him question everything. In her eyes, he saw the possibility of a life different from the chaos he'd known. But such a life came at a price, one he wasn't sure he was willing to pay. As their bond grew, so did the risks. He had enemies, and they wouldn't be pleased to learn that Vincent Romano, the feared mafia boss, had fallen for a simple waitress. Emily had always found solace in routine. Every morning, she would wake up at 6, make a cup of coffee, and walk the few blocks to the small cafe where she worked. It was a quiet life, a safe life. Nothing ever changed, and that was exactly how she liked it. But ever since Vincent had entered her life, everything seemed to be shifting. At first, she didn't understand it. He was a man of few words, always looking at her with an intensity she couldn't quite place. Each time he came in, their conversations grew longer, more comfortable, as though they were slowly drawing closer, even though the world around them couldn't be more different. Vincent was a man who lived in the shadows, whose life was built on power and fear. He never spoke about his business, never revealed the dark past that followed him everywhere. But in Emily, he found something he never thought he would, peace. It was a strange, comforting peace that he couldn't quite explain. He had spent his entire life surrounded by danger, his every step watched by enemies. And yet, in Emily's presence, he felt as though he could breathe. As the days passed, their bond grew. Emily began to look forward to seeing him, to the quiet moments where the world outside seemed to disappear. But even though she didn't know it yet, her life was about to change in ways she couldn't imagine. One evening, after a long shift, Vincent invited her to dinner. Emily hesitated, not because she didn't want to go, but because something about him seemed different. He was unlike anyone she had ever met. There was an air of mystery around him, a sense of danger that she couldn't ignore. Still, she agreed. It wasn't long before Emily realized that Vincent wasn't just a man she had met by chance. He was someone who carried the weight of an entire underworld on his shoulders. But Vincent was determined to keep Emily safe from that world. He didn't want her to know the truth. But as their relationship deepened, the lines between the life he wanted to protect her from and the life they were beginning to share started to blur. Emily wasn't naive. She began to sense that there was more to Vincent than he was letting on. And one night, when she accidentally overheard a conversation between Vincent and one of his associates, the truth hit her like a ton of bricks. Vincent was no ordinary man. He was a mafia boss, a feared and powerful figure, and his enemies were everywhere. Emily found herself caught in a whirlwind. torn between the man she was beginning to love and the terrifying world he was trying to keep her away from. It was a world she didn't belong in, but the pull of her feelings for Vincent was undeniable. She was falling for him, despite everything she had learned, and she didn't know how to stop it. The days that followed were a blur for Emily. Her life, once simple and predictable, was now filled with uncertainty and confusion. Vincent had been different from the moment they met, but now the truth about who he was hung in the air like an unspoken question. She couldn't deny the pull she felt toward him, but now she also couldn't ignore the fact that he lived in a world she didn't understand, a world of power, danger, and fear. Despite the unease that bubbled inside her, Emily continued to see Vincent. They would meet at the same cafe where they first met, or he would pick her up for dinner, always with the same warm smile, as if nothing had changed. But everything had changed. Emily couldn't forget what she had overheard that night, the hushed conversation between Vincent and his associate. The words "Mafia boss" kept echoing in her mind, and every time she looked at Vincent, she saw the man she thought she knew, but with a new layer of complexity. She began to question everything. Was he hiding things from her? Did he think she was too fragile to handle the truth? And if so, why had he allowed her to get so close to him? One evening, after a quiet dinner, Emily couldn't hold it in anymore. She needed to know the truth. She asked him directly, her voice trembling with the weight of her words. "Vincent, what's really going on? I know who you are. You can't hide this from me." Vincent's eyes softened, and for the first time, Emily saw the vulnerability that lay beneath his tough exterior. He took her hands in his grip firm but gentle. "I didn't want you to know, Emily. I didn't want to drag you into this world. But now I can't keep pretending. Yes, I'm involved in things that you don't understand. But I need you to know, none of that matters to me when I'm with you." Emily's heart pounded in her chest as she processed his words. She wanted to believe him, to trust him, but the fear gnawing at her wasn't easy to shake. "What does that mean for us, Vincent?" she asked quietly, looking into his eyes for answers. He paused for a moment, as if contemplating the depth of his words. "It means I'll protect you, Emily, but I can't promise you a life of peace. Not in this world." Emily felt a lump form in her throat. The truth hit her hard, but it also deepened her feelings for him. She didn't want to walk away, not now, not when she had already given so much of her heart to him. Yet, the reality of their situation weighed heavily on her. They were from two different worlds, and the life she had once known seemed like a distant memory. She found herself torn between love and fear, between the man she had come to care for and the dangerous world he inhabited. But no matter how much she tried to reason with herself, Emily couldn't walk away. She was in too deep now. And so, they continued their relationship, each day becoming more entangled in the complexity of Vincent's world. Emily knew it wouldn't be easy, but she also knew that she couldn't stop herself from loving him. The days continued to pass in a blur of emotions and uncertain steps. Emily found herself living a double life, caught between the world she once knew and the one Vincent had introduced her to. She tried to hold on to the simplicity of her past, but the more time she spent with Vincent, the more she realized how impossible that was. There were moments, like when they sat together at dinner or walked through the park, when everything felt normal, when she could forget the dangerous edge of Vincent's life. But those moments were fleeting. Vincent's world was never far from the surface. She knew it, and he knew it too. They both lived with the constant reminder of the dark forces that surrounded them. One evening, Vincent took her out to a secluded restaurant, far from the prying eyes of his world. The setting was intimate, the soft glow of candlelight illuminating his face. Emily had never seen him look so vulnerable. He was always so controlled, but tonight, he let his guard down. "I wish I could give you everything you deserve," Vincent said quietly, looking across the table at her. His voice was filled with a sadness that tugged at Emily's heart. "But I can't. Not in the world I live in." Emily reached across the table, taking his hand in hers. She understood what he meant. She had seen enough of his life now to know the dangers he faced, the enemies who wanted to bring him down. But none of that mattered to her. "Vincent, I don't need a perfect life. I don't need everything. I just need you," she said softly, her eyes locked with his. For a moment, the world outside seemed to disappear. There was no Mafia, no danger, just the two of them, sharing an unspoken understanding. But reality came crashing back when Vincent's phone rang. He glanced at the screen, his expression hardening instantly. Emily felt a chill run down her spine. The moment was over. Vincent stood up, his demeanor shifting from tender to focused, the walls of his world coming up again. "I have to take this," he said, stepping away from the table. Emily watched him, a mix of concern and sadness flooding her heart. She knew that no matter how hard she tried, she could never escape the darkness that followed him. He returned moments later, his face grim. "We need to go," he said simply, his voice leaving no room for argument. Emily followed him outside, her thoughts racing. She had always known Vincent's world was dangerous, but tonight, she was reminded of just how deep he was into it. As they drove through the dark streets, Emily couldn't shake the feeling that they were headed into something far bigger than either of them. She wanted to ask what had happened, what the phone call was about, but she didn't. She knew better than to pry. Vincent wasn't a man who shared his burdens easily. They arrived at his place, the silence between them heavy. Emily stepped out of the car, her mind spinning with questions, but she kept them to herself. She had learned that sometimes, the less she knew, the safer she would be. But that night, as she lay in bed, her thoughts kept drifting back to Vincent. She couldn't help but feel that things were about to get much more complicated. The next few days passed in a haze of uncertainty. Vincent became more distant, lost in the shadows of his world. Emily tried to push away the worry that gnawed at her every time she saw him retreat into himself. She couldn't ignore the dark circles under his eyes, the way his jaw clenched when a name was mentioned, the way he always seemed to be on edge. It was as though the weight of his life was pulling him further from her, and no matter how much she tried to reach out, he kept her at arm's length. One afternoon, after a particularly quiet breakfast, Vincent spoke. His voice was strained, filled with a heaviness she hadn't heard before. "Emily, there's something you need to understand," he began, his gaze avoiding hers. "This world I live in, it's not a place for someone like you. You can't be a part of it. I won't let you get caught up in it." Emily's heart sank at his words. She knew it wasn't coming from a place of indifference, but the thought of losing him, of never being able to share in his world, felt unbearable. "Vincent," she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. "I don't want to be anywhere else. I just want to be with you." But even as the words left her lips, Emily knew that they weren't enough. Vincent had already made up his mind. He wasn't going to let her be a part of the chaos that surrounded him, no matter how much she loved him. The next few days were a blur. Emily found herself walking around in a daze, trying to carry on with her life, but it felt as though something was missing. Every corner of the cafe reminded her of Vincent, the way he'd sit at his usual spot, the quiet way he'd talk to her, the way his eyes would soften when they shared a moment of peace. She couldn't shake the feeling that she was losing him, that she was being pushed out of the life they had built together. One evening, when the cafe was nearly empty, Emily heard a familiar voice. She looked up to see Vincent standing in the doorway, his eyes searching hers. "I don't want to lose you, Emily," he said, his voice filled with an emotion she couldn't quite place. She stood frozen for a moment, unsure of what to say. "Then don't push me away," she replied softly, her heart racing in her chest. Vincent stepped closer, his expression softening. "I'm not pushing you away. I'm trying to protect you. This world isn't safe for someone like you. But I can't walk away from you, either." Emily felt a surge of relief wash over her, but it was quickly followed by a wave of uncertainty. She didn't know what would happen next, but she knew that whatever it would come with consequences. And as Vincent reached out to take her hand, she realized that she was already in too deep. There was no turning back now. No matter how much they tried to fight it, their worlds were colliding, and the stakes were higher than either of them could have imagined. Days turned into weeks, and the tension between Emily and Vincent only grew. The closer they became, the more dangerous Vincent's world seemed to become as well. Despite his best efforts to protect her, Emily could feel the weight of the life he led pressing down on them. The phone calls, the late-night meetings, the cryptic messages that Vincent refused to explain. Every time she looked at him, she saw the same man who had swept her off her feet with his quiet charm. But now she could see the cracks in the facade, the way his shoulders tensed when he thought she wasn't looking, the way his eyes seemed haunted at times. One night, Vincent took her out again. They drove through the city, the silence between them thick with unspoken words. Emily sat in the passenger seat, her fingers nervously tapping on her leg. She didn't know where they were going, but she didn't ask. She trusted him, even though part of her felt a deep unease. They arrived at a dimly lit building, an old warehouse tucked away at the edge of the city. Vincent parked the car and turned to her, his face serious. "I need you to stay in the car," he said, his voice low. Emily's heart skipped a beat. "Vincent, what's going on?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. He hesitated for a moment, then leaned in, his forehead resting against hers. "I just need to do something. Stay here, please." His words, though gentle, carried an unmistakable urgency. Emily nodded, though her gut told her that something was wrong. She watched him walk away, disappearing into the shadows of the warehouse. As she sat alone in the car, she couldn't shake the feeling that this was it, that the life Vincent had been trying to protect her from was finally catching up to them. She couldn't sit still, couldn't stop the worry from gnawing at her. What if something happened to him? What if he didn't come back? Emily knew Vincent was capable of handling himself. She knew he was a force to be reckoned with in his world. But that didn't stop her heart from racing. Time seemed to drag on, each passing second stretching longer than the last. Finally, after what felt like hours, the car door opened, and Vincent slid in next to her. His face was tense, his jaw clenched. He looked at her for a moment, then reached for her hand, his grip firm but gentle. "It's done," he said simply, though the heaviness in his voice told her that whatever had just happened, it wasn't over. Emily searched his face for answers, but all she saw was the same man who had become her world, the man who had been trying so hard to keep her safe. "What's going on, Vincent?" she asked, her voice trembling. He sighed, leaning back in his seat, his fingers still intertwined with hers. "I'm not sure how much longer I can keep you away from this, Emily," he said, his voice soft but filled with finality. "The truth is, you're already in it. You just don't realize how deep yet." Emily's heart sank. She had always known that Vincent's world wasn't a simple one, but hearing him admit it, hearing the weight of his words, made it all too real. She had already crossed a line. There was no turning back. The world Vincent had kept her safe from was now part of her life, and she knew that whatever came next, she would face it by his side. She had no choice. And in that moment, Emily realized that no matter what the future held, she was ready to face it, with Vincent, for better or for worse. The days that followed were filled with a growing tension, a constant reminder that Vincent's world was never as far away as he tried to make it seem. Emily had always thought of herself as someone who could handle anything, but the deeper she got involved with Vincent, the more she realized how little she knew about the darkness that clung to him. She could feel the changes in the air, subtle shifts, whispers of something looming just around the corner. Vincent was still the man she loved, but there was something different about him now. He was quieter, more withdrawn, and it was clear that whatever he had done that night at the warehouse had come with consequences. One evening, as they sat together in silence, Emily finally spoke. "Vincent, what is going on? You've been acting like something's not right. I need to know." Vincent's eyes met hers, his expression hardening for a moment before softening again. "I've been trying to keep you safe, Emily. You have to understand, this isn't just a simple life we're living. I've been trying to protect you from all of this. I know you're trying, but I don't want to be protected anymore. I want to be with you, Vincent. I don't want to keep pretending that this life doesn't affect me," she said, her voice steady despite the emotions swirling inside her. Vincent looked away, his jaw tight. "I never wanted you to be a part of this. But you are now, whether I like it or not. The choices I make, the people I deal with, it all affects you. And I can't change that." Emily reached out, gently touching his arm. "Then let me in. Let me help. I don't want to live in fear, Vincent. I want to understand what's going on. I want to be a part of your world, even if it's hard." Vincent turned to her, his face a mixture of frustration and longing. "I never wanted to drag you into this, Emily. But you're right. You're already in it. There's no turning back now." Emily's heart raced as she took in his words. The truth was undeniable. She was already part of Vincent's world. She had stepped into it willingly, trusting him, and now she had to face the consequences. "Then what happens now?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Vincent leaned back in his chair, his hand running through his hair as he let out a deep sigh. "Now, we fight," he said quietly, his eyes dark with resolve. "I've got enemies. People who want to see me fall, and they won't stop until they've destroyed everything I care about. That includes you, Emily. Emily felt a shiver run down her spine at the gravity of his words. She had known that Vincent's world was dangerous, but hearing him say it aloud made it real in a way it never had been before. She wasn't just living with the danger of his world now. She was part of it, and that made her just as vulnerable. But there was no turning back. Not now. Not when she had already given so much of her heart to him. I'll fight with you, she said firmly, her voice strong despite the fear creeping into her chest. I'm not going to walk away, Vincent. Whatever happens, we face it together. Vincent looked at her for a long moment, his expression softening. He reached for her hand, squeezing it tightly. You don't know what you're getting into, Emily. This isn't a fight you can just walk away from. She smiled softly, her heart pounding. I'm not walking away. I'm standing with you, no matter what. And in that moment, Vincent realized just how deep their connection ran. Emily wasn't just a bystander in his life anymore. She was part of it, and she wasn't going anywhere. The road ahead would be hard, full of obstacles and dangers, but for the first time in a long time, Vincent felt like maybe, just maybe, he wasn't alone in the fight. Together, they would face whatever came next. The days following Vincent's admission were filled with an uneasy calm. They were both aware of the dangerous road ahead, but neither of them was willing to back down. They had made their choice, and now they had to face whatever consequences came with it. The threat that Vincent had spoken of, his enemies closing in, was no longer a distant worry. It was real, and it was coming for them. Emily tried to keep herself grounded in the routine of her life, but everything felt different now. The moment she had accepted Vincent's world, she had unknowingly stepped into a new reality, one where danger loomed at every turn. Despite the risks, Emily found herself growing closer to Vincent, understanding the weight he carried with each passing day. She had always known he was a man of mystery, but now she was beginning to see the man beneath the mask, the man who fought not just for survival, but for the people he cared about. He was a man who had spent his life in the shadows, a man who had never truly known peace. But when he was with her, even for just a few moments, it felt like they could escape everything, if only for a short while. One evening, Vincent invited her to his apartment, and the usual tension in the air was palpable. He had been quiet all day, his mind clearly elsewhere. As Emily sat on the couch, watching him pace back and forth, she could see the struggle in his eyes. Vincent, she said softly, breaking the silence. You don't have to do this alone. I'm here. I've always been here. Vincent stopped in his tracks, looking at her as though seeing her for the first time. His expression softened, but only for a brief moment before it hardened again. You don't understand what you're asking, Emily, he replied, his voice low. I can't let you be part of this. Not fully. Not the way I am. Emily stood up and walked toward him, her heart pounding in her chest. But I am part of it now, Vincent. You can't push me away anymore. She reached for his hand, and this time, he didn't pull away. His fingers intertwined with hers, a silent agreement. I'm not asking you to fight, but I won't let you face this on your own. We'll face it together, she said, her voice steady. Vincent let out a deep breath, his eyes never leaving hers. I don't want you to get hurt. I can't bear the thought of it, he said, the vulnerability in his voice making Emily's heart ache. She knew what he was afraid of. He had always been afraid of losing the people he cared about, and she was no exception. But she wasn't going to back down. I'm not afraid, she said softly. I'm with you, no matter what happens. For a long time, Vincent remained silent, his grip on her hand tightening. Finally, he spoke, his voice almost a whisper. You don't know what you're getting into, Emily. The people who want to take me down, they won't stop. They'll come for you too. I can't promise you'll be safe. Emily swallowed hard, but stood her ground. I don't care, she replied. I love you, Vincent. And that's enough for me. Vincent's expression softened, the weight of his own fears slowly lifting. For the first time in what felt like forever, he allowed himself to believe that maybe, just maybe, there was a chance for them. I don't deserve you, he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. Emily smiled, her heart swelling with love for him. You don't have to deserve me, Vincent. You just have to want me. In that moment, they both knew that the road ahead would be difficult, that the danger would never truly go away. But as long as they were together, they would face it side by side. Whatever came next, they would endure it together, because that was all they could do. And somehow, Emily knew that would be enough.